Hello, hello. I am the Fairy Doctor. The Fairy Doctor is in. Tell me what ails, and I'll tell you a tale. Or rather, because you are not live here with me today, I invite you to hold this in your heart, in your mind, your query, your question, your longing, your wishing, and let me pull from my doctor's bag a tale for you. I do not peddle lies or snake oil, but rather the medicine of stories. For it has long been known that we learned our magic, our cunning, from the fair folk, and thus became fairy doctors ourselves, those weaving magic and wonder. And where better to find those tales than in the stories? So hold that moment and know that you have encountered this tale because it knows that you need it. From my doctor's bag, I will reveal a tale of strings attached and fairy taboos. In this jar of yarn is held a story. A story, well, that begins at a market. In this market, a midwife was shopping. And the midwife was shopping for just everyday things. She had nowhere to be at that moment. She was not, well, she was always on call, but no one was due. And then, as she fondled the fabric that was a little out of her price range before moving on to acquire the eggs that she was after, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned, and there was a tall, slim man with a panicked look on his face. "What is it?" she said. "You must come with me now. My wife, she is about to give birth, and we need your help." Well, of course, and she followed him there and then. He took her down a strange path, out of the market and out through between the houses into the fields surrounding, along around a corner into the woods that loomed dark and brooding. And she was momentarily concerned, but this was her job. If this was where his wife was, then this was where she must go. And so she followed him through the winding twisty woods with the winding twisty roots and the winding twisty branches, with the deep dark green leaves filtering the sunlight. It was a grey day to begin with, but there in the depths of the twisty, windy woods, well, the light grew dim. Soon, however, it opened up. Path opened up into a clearing, and there was a house like any other, though perhaps slightly more beautifully painted than usual. Every line perfect, every edge cut in exactly as it should be, every windowsill gleaming in the dusky light. The man welcomed her into his house, in through the door that opened without a squeak. She barely noticed as she went straight up the stairs to where he sent her, to the bedchamber, where sure enough his wife was giving birth, or at least she was trying to. The baby was having a hard time coming, and the midwife worked long and hard with the mother, and at the end of it, the mother held a beautiful baby. Sweat slicked her hair back. Her face was flushed from the effort. But a smile glowed on her face, and the baby was perfect, as all babies must be. And the midwife, well, she packed up her things and she turned to leave, and the husband was there, and he said, "Wait, will you help us care for the baby? Just for a little while." And she said, "Of course." For he offered her room and board and a good wage. And so the midwife began to care for the baby, to take him to his mother when she needed to nurse him, and to take him to his bed when it was time to sleep. He had a gorgeous cot, beautifully carved with leaves that looked like they were almost alive, twisting around the bars. The baby was quieter than she was used to. It would smile at things she could not see and laugh very occasionally, appearing to listen to music that she could not hear. She began to notice that things were a little bit odd, and eventually she asked the couple why she had been brought here. And they looked at each other. And they said, "Well, my dear, we are of the other world. We are the fair folk. And we needed your help, a human midwife, to help us bring our baby into the world." "Oh," she said, "well, that makes sense." And she continued about her day. They began to trust her with extra things, and one day, not so long after that, she had been to the market and come back. The fairy husband gave her a vial of ointment, and he said, "Make sure to apply these to our son's eyes every morning and evening, just as the sun rises and just as the sun sets, when it is neither day nor night. But be careful to not get any in your own eyes." "Sure, I can do that." And so, alongside keeping an eye on the babe and making sure he was healthy, and going into the market to bring back treats for the mother and helping her get back on her feet and all of the things that she could help with around the place, and being fed and kept very comfortably, the midwife began every dawn and every dusk a drop of ointment on the baby's eyes. And every morning and every evening she would anoint the baby's eyes. And every morning and every evening she would carefully wash her hands. And every morning and every evening she would anoint the baby's eyes. Until one morning, tired from a rather disturbed night, she anointed the baby's eyes and then rubbed the sleep from her own. Immediately, the ointment took effect. And through the eye that had no ointment on it, the house appeared the same, but through the other eye, it began to shimmer and crackle, and the glamour fell away. The midwife looked around, and while through the one eye there were soft furnishings and beautiful meals to be seen, through the other eye it was a dank cave, damp, with a stream that ran through where normally it was a blue rug. There were vines around the dip that the baby would sleep in. No cot at all. The baby seemed fine, but this surely was not on. And the midwife remembered that she had broken the rules. She very carefully washed her hands, put the ointment back where it lived, and continued on about her day, ignoring the strange sprites that would come in and whistle to the baby and play with shadow puppets for him. making him laugh. She ignored the odd, twisted thing in the corner that watched her. Wherever she went, she ignored that the husband and wife who had been so kind to her, well, they weren't quite as elegant as they appeared under the glamour. They had a strange, unearthly beauty, but they were entirely naked. She managed to ignore all of that and continue about her work. And soon the fairy man handed her a large bag of money. Not gold, that would have been difficult to spend at the market, but coppers and silvers, and a few trinkets in there besides that she could palm or wear as she preferred. And he and his wife thanked her profusely, and the baby waved and smiled, little more wizened than perhaps he had appeared when she could not see him clearly, a little more wise than perhaps he had appeared when she thought him just a human babe in arms. But she thanked them, she curtsied, and she went off to the market. She went back to her life as it had been before. Every now and then she'd catch something strange out of the ointmented eye. She'd see something odd, and she'd carefully, oh so carefully, ignore it. But over time, well, the other villagers and townsfolk, the other people at the market began to notice that she could tell things about them, and so they'd start to come to her for advice, and she would give it. A few years later, at the market, she saw the fairy gentleman with his son, now quite tall himself. They were looking through the fabrics at the fabric stall. They were eyeing up the beautiful carvings. And she greeted them warmly. "Oh, hello, good sir, and how are you? My dear boy, you have grown so much." And the fairy gentleman looked at her. "You can see us," he said. "Well, yes, of course," she said. "By which eye can you see us?" he asked her. And without thinking, without hesitation, without a moment pause, her hand flew to the eye that had been anointed with the ointment. He took out his knife and put out her eye, and she never saw him, his son, or the strange things again. She did, however, keep a touch of the uncanny about her, for a midwife already begins walking that liminal space between the other world and this. Now, that perhaps is not a particularly cheery tale, but it does carry some important medicine. One piece of the magic that must be remembered is to not always assume that what is on face value is, in fact, the whole of the truth. There can be many things going on underneath that glamour. And this is true most obviously in modern times when we communicate through computer screens, when we see others' lives through Instagram filters, which in a few years' time, that reference may well date me, through all sorts of carefully curated stories. Those stories tell a part of the tale, but not the whole tale. The husband, the wife, the baby, they were there in their home, that was true. But the home wasn't quite as the midwife had been expecting. The second piece of magic, of medicine in this tale, is a reminder that a gift stolen is a gift that one cannot trust. If we take it through deceit or through accident and not actually owning up to what has occurred, then we run the risk of losing it in the future when our deception is found out. But the third piece of magic, of medicine woven in this story, is the relationship between the other and the human. They needed her, and she needed them. We need each other. Historically, it has been the case that the tales of changelings, of fairy children left in exchange for a human baby, were rife. Changeling children. One day a mother would discover that her baby was different, was not how they should be. Something had happened, and they would swear that the baby had been stolen away and replaced by a fairy baby, a changeling baby. And so they would do whatever they could to get their own babe back. Nowadays, we reflect on those stories and think that perhaps in actuality, those changeling babies were disabled, neurodivergent, especially autistic. That there was something going on there. And this question of the other. The otherworldly beings, the magical beings, the fair folk. The changeling children that may well have been human, but other than the normative, other than expected. Those of us that walk the magical paths, the queer folk, the minorities in any given space, are considered other. And in reality, well, when you face the folk with power, material power, worldly power, most of us are other as far as they're concerned. So in this tale, the others needed each other. Perhaps we can remember that when we meet people who are strange to us, there is still something that we can work together on, some way in which we can help each other. Whether it is to help them move more in our world, to support them in becoming more integrated in the physical, with the fairy baby, or perhaps it is that they can help us with their wisdom or wealth. Or perhaps we simply help each other through being in community. We then come to realize that we are others together. We are all the other somewhere. And the fairy folk in this story, the couple were perfectly willing to pay the midwife handsomely to support her in her life. So I often think that if she had been honest about the mistake, perhaps she would have at least kept her eye. Perhaps there could have been a partnership built on trust, on honesty there. For in other tales, that is precisely what occurs. So, your prescription. I take out my doctor's pad. I turn to a fresh page. I pluck the quill. Dip it in the bottle of the story. Each morning and evening, at dusk and at dawn, reflect on how you two are other. And remember to be in honest community together. Enjoy. Thank you for joining me today. I am Halo Quinn. I am the Fairy Doctor. My office is now closed. I share a story each month on these live streams, and in the Enchanted Academy, you can join me for the Cauldron of Awen, where, if you wish, you and I and the goddess of initiation and inspiration, Ceridwen, and the great bard of Wales, Taliesin, will go on a journey together to awaken the storyteller, the bard within you, that you may always be connected to divine inspiration, that you may always have the words at the tip of your tongue, that you may always know how to share your story in a way that both heals your heart and enchants your audience. Come and find me and find out more in the Enchanted Academy. I look forward to seeing you there. We start on April Fool's Day. No joke, just that leap into inspiration. For now, may your path be enchanted, may your heart be filled with story, and may your eyes stay firmly in your head. Till next time.